the worlds were still created for, able-bodied people at the end of the day. But you can take what you want from that. The second person, as you see, is this idea about the freedom from physical world constraints. For her, it wasn't a disability, although she did have a mental health issue. For her, it was about age. It was about not making assumptions on me or how I should act or how I should behave or what I should know or not know or what my cognitive ability is on my age, which she felt in the physical world people did. So that's kind of where that theme sits in a couple of the quotes from that particular theme. And this is a very long quote, so you don't need to read it all if you don't want to. But this again was a couple of the men very much said that they found it a bit easier to talk about their health in the virtual worlds, which is a pretty important point, because men can sometimes be reluctant to go to the doctor, etc. That's been shown in other studies. But for this chap, the ability to be in a crowd but still have a private conversation that you might not say openly, again, was different. Now, you might say that you could do that in other online areas, so, you have to take that in whatever way you think. The distrust was about that actually when not really that many people actually said that they distrusted the information that they were hearing, but they still had this chap's idea, if you like, in the back of their head that anybody can fake an identity, even create a web page or anything. But actually they went basically on, does what this person is saying make sense? Is this health information that I may have seen before, does it sound the same? Can I find information to collaborate or corroborate what it says? So they didn't take this information, health information within the virtual world as gospel always, but that's actually what we want them to do. We want them to compare and contrast. So they were showing health literacy skills, if you like. So when we look at health literacy in general, there was issues with search. People said, that the searching for information was actually the searching for information, so the search in virtual worlds, or in particularly Second Life, lots of people said it was almost, at that point, it was almost pointless in looking up the virtual world. The way they found information and the way that they got to find out about what talk they should go to or whatever was through social searching. It was because of the groups that they were in. So they were told about things, why don't you come over here? So there was a kind of serendipity involved, if you like. And this chap kind of says it quite nicely, it's about these groups. As this information is passed, people make some judgment on whether they think it's worth passing it on to someone else. Not that the talk is going to be excellent, just that they think the subject matter is important. So sometimes as well what happened here is people were not looking for the information always for themselves. Sometimes they were just curious. Other times they wanted the health information because they had the condition. Other times it was because they thought someone they knew had the condition and they wanted to know more about it. So this idea of serendipity was quite nicely kind of captured in this woman's quotes. And obviously these quotes on a page look much shorter, but you can have a little read through that. I'll give you a second to read that before I move on. So in some ways she's comparing the different ways that she can find information, because no one said when they're looking for health information they only look in a virtual world. They use multiple sources. Okay, what's the time? So understanding health information, because this was important. So as I kind of touched on before, this ability to simulate or to go through a scenario, especially with another, whether that was a significant other or whether it was just people they met at the area, was really quite powerful. And this woman's quote is about the PTSD simulation. Now, in this case, the woman didn't, it was the PTS virtual Iraq, if any of you have been to that. Not because she had a military PTSD, but because the features that they were showing in the simulation were still similar. And when she went through it with the loved one, unbeknown to her, I had actually spoken to him as well. And he said that he had read and he had looked at books about PTSD, but he never really understood what she was going through until they went through this simulation. And that was quite similar with other people. So there was this journeying through this information, as I say. In the second chapter, you can see that again. That it's this kind of community kind of networks, if you like, that are quite vital to their understanding, the ability to discuss and make kind of sense of what it is they're heaping. So this kind of led on to this idea of a social sense making. Sorry, this one's taking a minute to res. And this is where I got this kind of theme from, this social sense making. It was coming out very, very clearly that there was a lot of discussion, there was a lot of debate about the information that they were hearing, whether that was with each other in the chat or whether it was back to the practitioner that was presenting the information. So they weren't taking this in face value, they were making quite good, they were showing a lot of health literacy, if you like, skills in making a decision on the weight or not of the information. So the trustworthiness, obviously, if you're looking at any kind of health information, one of the things you need to try to gauge is the trustworthiness, or, sorry, you have to ask the participants what they thought was the trustworthiness of us. Now, if we're talking about people in a virtual world who are presenting themselves as avatars and discussing health information, then one of the questions that I wanted to ask them is, does it make any difference what the avatar who is presenting the information looks like? And that's really where this kind of theme came from, about the avatar professional identity. There was a lot of discussion about that from each of the 25 people, but when I looked at it and analysed it, there was actually no consensus. So it wasn't like 25 of them said yes, they must be dressed professionally. There was a bit of a split, actually, about whether they should be professional, whether they shouldn't look sexual, whether they shouldn't be smoking. I think one guy said, you know, to me, it doesn't matter. They can be a flying toaster for all I care. What I care about is, do I believe the information or can I test it against other information? Now, one of the other things, though, was important was about recommendations or the credibility of the place. So, for example, even though Virtual Ability Island quite clearly say we do not take responsibility for anybody that presents in our area, there was an almost underlying assumption that if they were presenting at Virtual Ability or an area or an island or a place that they thought was trustworthy, then they had an almost slightly leaning towards trusting then what the person said. They thought there was some sort of vetting of the people to an extent, which I think there probably is. Okay, so there wasn't really an absolute consensus. And then they did check information, etc. And then other folks would say, as I said, no, doesn't matter. It depends on the person and if it makes sense to me. So I don't feel I need to go and check it because they're on a trustworthy island. They sound like they're credible and the information sounds sensible. So there were a few different ways, if you like, that they checked for trustworthiness. Where am I? I started, I think, at 10 past, so if you're needing me to speed up, please let me know. So health literacy, in a way, though, is included in the people that deliver it, right? So, for example, if you come and see me in a consultation and I use a whole pile of jargon, then my health literacy skills are not very good, actually. You see what I mean? So there's a number of ways to do it. So one of the things that happened as well was this poor naming of errors. So, for example, there's a really good, and I think you might have been to it, a really nice simulation where you sit on a blood vessel and you travel through what is a clotted arteriosclerotic artery, and you go through it, you sit on that and you fly through that. It's a really good way, I think, for people to get an understanding of what it's like inside a blood vessel, if you like. You know, the other one is sitting on the testes, exactly, etc. But actually the area where that blood vessel thing is called Houston something. You know, it's like Houston University or Houston something, I can't exactly remember. But it doesn't mention blood vessels or arteriosclerotic, which would probably not mean much to folk actually, but it doesn't say blood clotted or narrowed, vessels. It doesn't say what it does what it says in the tin. So how are you meant to find that? And that's what the chap at the end was kind of saying, or in one of these, I think he might have said it here. Yeah, pick a topic. Here's the thing. How would I know to look up an island named, in that case, I can't remember what it was, I've removed the name. No, how am I meant to know that that's related to hearts? And that's my point. Give me a clue. And that's exactly what, Google is cleverer than that. So that's again returns to this idea that I've gave up in looking on the search. It's actually because Joe told me to go to this talk, or Jessie, or, Oro, or whatever. So, a number of things about how they could find that information, or mistakes made really by us. Another one that I spoke about before was, either just having 101 note cards that you had to click and work your way through, which people found boring and really quite tedious, and after a while would get fed up and just leave the information. Or the information was so basic that it really, again, it was like, well, I know all that. However, that was only that person's opinion. But there was an idea that if it had a wee bit of ability to speak to somebody, or if there was a way to increase the complexity, that would have been actually useful to me, instead of just showing me something that I would have been able to find in 5 minutes on the net. I wanted a bit more than that. So I suppose the overall feel here was use the 3D virtual world to the best. Yeah, exactly, Tim. And some folks said that they didn't like that either, because it's like, well, I know why they're doing it, but I would rather I'm in a virtual world looking for the information because I want to be in the virtual world looking for the information, not because I want to go back to the web. Yeah, personally. And what actually about the majority of them, I can't exactly remember how many, but many of them said that they went to web pages when they were really quite ill and they wanted information quickly, or they felt a bit ill and they wanted information quickly to make a decision whether to phone their doctor. It didn't stop them, but it just wanted to give them a wee bit of backed up information. If they were looking for information, they went straight to pages that they knew, WebMD or Mayo or whatever. If they were just looking in general, they get frustrated when they got to a web page and then there was all these adverts down the side. Then they started to distrust the motive of the web page. Now, that's not to say that the web page was wrong or whatever, but they became a little bit suspicious and they didn't like that. So that kind of was, there was errors by health the strategies used by the people that were presenting the information, by the practitioners or by the organisations. So what about behaviour change? Because at the end, we know we can give out information like anything we want, we can make sure folk understand it, but behaviour change is actually the really difficult bit, because often people know what to do, but they don't take the information. So out of 25, I think I had 14 people said they made a change. Some of these were long term. So when we look at this first slide, this is really about using health information for a physical world change. So where they said, you know, in the first one she's talking about, it made a difference to how I looked at food. The second one is very much saying the information, the ability to have it reinforced, the ability to go back to a practitioner and talk about it, helped me to lose weight and to maintain that weight over a number of months, years. Yeah. So that was quite a powerful statement, as you can imagine. And then the last person said, yeah, I actually stopped smoking, and I lost weight. And I really think that that was because of Second Life. So that, again, you know, is quite powerful in itself, that there definitely was behaviour change, and there was a lot more quotes to confirm these changes. But what was important as well was that there was also changes to behaviour from a social aspect, from a confidence, from self-esteem, which started to do this more bi-directional. So mastering skills of being in a social situation like this, where some folk had some social anxiety, that reduced or got better. The first person is quite clearly saying this: my social skills improved, how to act around people. It's not what I would call normal, but it's much better than it was. And, you know, he has autism, so he has something a frame of reference, if you like, to think about what was this like before I started using the virtual world. So when he thought about it, he thought, you know, this is not actually just a change in the virtual world, this has actually influenced how I am in the physical world. And the second person was very much the same. At the end of that quote, you can see, you know, I felt the difference in myself. It is good. I noticed a change in just the way I walk down the hall, and the way it starts to feel good and more control. And I try to build on that. Actually, she goes on to say that she has reduced her antidepressants. And for her, that's quite a big thing, because she's paying for them. She's in a she's in a country where she has to pay for things. So she was able to make a decision on how she reallocated her funds, because I don't need as much antipsychotic or antidepressant, but I can actually go and speak to a psychologist because I've got a bit more money for that. So there was a few things that, you know, I wasn't able to test these. I could only go on what the people told me. So I suppose here's a kind of take-homes over the whole, because you're obviously only getting a snapshot and a snippet, but interacting with health information practitioners communities can increase health literacy engagement and lead to health behaviour change in the physical world. However, we have to set it up properly, and there's been a recent paper in the Internet Journal of Research, or Medical Internet Journal of Research, where they very much would say the opposite of this, because they just walked around different places and said they were all empty and nobody was there. But one of their recommendations, interestingly, was that somebody should go out and ask people what they actually did with information. So that's quite good. I'll be able to use that and say, see, I actually have done that. So that was quite interesting. But in this study, as I say, there was a lot of social capital coming out. So people were in communities, they were finding folk helpful. There was a lot of reciprocal type behaviour. They were feeling that they belonged to a community. They felt that there was a friendliness within certain communities that they had joined. So there was lots of kind of aspects of social capital. So that made me start to think about this second question. And this is a fancy way to put the question, but effectively it is, how does being in a 3D social virtual world affect or influence your ability to live with or cope with your long-term condition in the physical world? And I've just finished 3 case studies over 3 months, 2 focus groups, and a little bit of social network analysis, and I'm in the process of analysing that, but trust me, there is some very exciting and interesting findings from that, but I still have to analyse it all. So, okay, just checking if there's anything in there that you need to see. I've kind of spoke about this. The case studies, as I spoke about, over 3 months. And in the case studies, what they've done is they have I've interviewed them 2 or 3 times, depending on actually one of them became unwell, so I only managed to interview them twice through the 3 months, but they've also gave me narrative diary data about times they were in the virtual world where whatever was happening helped them to live with or cope with. They've also given me pictures of places or people or areas that they think, again, have helped them. Sometimes it's about, I go to this area because it really helps me deal with stress, then that influences my physical world stress, and therefore it affects my pain, it influences my level of pain, etc., etc. So, thank you. I think that's me. This picture is a little picture what I did, where I did a little video with green screen. So, that's Callie and Evelyn together. So thank you very much. If there's any questions, please jump in, whether it's about the methods, whether it's about the findings, whether it's about the second study, which obviously I can only touch on. The one thing I will say is, although I'm telling you findings here from the first study, I doubt they're going to change, but they may be triangulated with the second study, if you like. I may compare, stuff that is similar between the two. So they might change. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie, Evelyn. Very interesting study. Thanks very much for telling us about it. Excellent, very exciting results as well from the first study, and we're looking forward to hear about the results from the second study. That was really wonderful. Thank you for telling us about it. In fact, the majority of the students here are now doing the research methods module. So thank you very much for telling us so much about the way in which you've collected your data. That is really interesting, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you from the crowd. Thanks again. Anybody, fire up.
And please, if you don't really agree with something, or you think there's something you want to argue against, please feel free to do that as well. It's absolutely fine.
I was wondering, we were discussing actually last week in our research methods a lot about interviewing and the difference, and how does it feel to interview people in these environments. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about it. What's the difference between interviewing in Second Life? You carried out your interviews and real life. Do you see any disadvantage about carrying out the interviews here, or was it all advantages?
Yep, I mean, thanks, Laurel. I think there is a lot of debate about one of the things that comes up and what comes up after I've spoken quite often to conferences where there's maybe people that don't understand virtual worlds is that there is an assumption that everybody that came to my study is telling lies and is actually not who they are, and how do I know they're not who they are, etc. Well, my argument is whether I'm talking to you on a phone or whether I'm talking to you sitting next to me, I have to take what you say as true. And when you talk about something to do with your health, it's your reality. That's your reality. So I have to have a level of trust that you're telling me the truth. Otherwise, I would never be able to do it. I would never be able to do the study. So I ask for demographics. I mean, one of the things that I do is I ask for, I left note cards on islands, and people that came along clicked the note card, and then they got a consent form, a participant information sheet, and a demographics form. And then they filled that in and they passed that back to me in a instant message. Nothing that was in any of those demographic forms when I either met the people. Now, some of them I didn't speak to in voice, but the ones that I did are the ones that had information in their profiles. Nothing contradicted what they told me in their demographics form. So I had to trust that they were telling me the truth. You also don't know what I'm going to ask them, so the chances of making up every single question I would answer to every question that I ask, I don't know, I just think it's slightly unbelievable that 25 folk just came and took part in an hour and a half's interview and made the whole thing up. So yes, there could be the possibility that they come twice. However, that's just something that I have to live with. That could happen in any online environment. They could have 10 alts there as well and take part, so you just have to go with that. What I did have to do, and actually I've published a paper about my methods, so I'll let you see that. Because I think there is a number of things that you have to, if you are doing interviews in Second Life, not about Second Life, I think that's different. Also, I think if you want to interview in Second Life, you have to understand the community standards. So if you do it in local chat, then you have to do it either in a private area where no one can see that local chat, or you have to do it in an instant message, which is private between the avatars, and then get consent to copy the instant message chat, because the community standards say that you're not allowed to take that without permission, but the local chat is more kind of free. So there's certain technical issues that you need to know about. I think if you bring someone into the virtual world and you start to interview them about the virtual world and how they're travelling through the virtual world, etc., and you have no understanding of the culture of the virtual world, no understanding of the language, even emoticons, loads of emoticons within my transcripts, and I had to make sense of that. I made some mistakes in the first few transcripts when I was using instant message, and I didn't really wait enough time to give someone an answer, time to answer, and I moved on to another question. When I went back to look at the transcripts, I had to really kind of pull them up and down and round about, because I thought that could easily be misconstrued as an answer to that. So therefore, the next time I did a little pilot of 6 people, I should have said. So by the time I looked at each transcript as I went along, and sometimes I slightly change a question. So that's obviously a legitimate process in qualitative research. but as I say, it also let me see that I had really not. Yeah, absolutely, Tim. So if I had just come in here 2 days ago and tried to interview about how you did things in the virtual world, and then I looked at the transcript, I would probably be like, what the devil are they talking about? Because certainly my supervisors were. I have to give them a glossary with the transcripts normally. So one of my points is you need to understand the culture. You need to understand the language. You need to have a respect for the people who are in the virtual world. If you act like, let's say, a noob, they're going to know quite quickly, and some folk are not too happy about that. If you're bumbling your way through and you obviously don't know what you're talking about, that then kind of reduces your credibility in a way, if you like. So there were some things that I did to try and help me. Yeah, there is, and whether that's right or wrong, but it's. There's also a bit you've got to respect what people say about being in the virtual world, etc., and their reasons for being there. So there was no judgment on that, and I think if you're in here and you understand it, then that's a different. You look at it in a different way. Anyway, I'm babbling on here, so let's see if there's another question. Maybe I'll see if I can find my paper.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'll turn off
on the terms of honesty or anonymity, I mean, this avatar is very new, and simply because I've created it for the research methods module, it's a case of more having to basically identify ourselves, who we really are in the real world, in the physical world. And I've created this to separate from the social avatar that I came into Second Life as used in social environment. But a concern I may have is that later on, the fact that this such a young avatar may not necessarily be taken quite so seriously as an older legacy name avatar.
Yeah, and I mean that was interesting because I mean out of 19 of the people who presented themselves as human. I had a couple of other people who were not in human form. Most of them who presented as human were younger, thinner. Sometimes said it almost looked like them went 20 years ago. However, because one time actually somebody said to me, why is there everybody good looking in the virtual world? Well, the reality is in physical world, we are constantly trying to make ourselves better looking, whether it's getting our hair cut, wearing nice clothes, trying to lose weight. I don't think that's actually that strange. And the idea that
trying to make an ugly avatar is actually quite tricky as well.
Well, that's a good point as well, Tim, exactly. But there's also the fact that, although what you said there was quite important as well, that you are using these avatars because the part of you that you want to present at certain times is different. Did I get that right? So you wanted to present, yeah. So that's
because, for example, some of these cases, I mean, I've created this avatar using my real name, simply because I feel if we're researching and we're going to go, say, in an anthropologist style where we go into a community and maybe immerse ourselves in that community, telling them that that we are, I feel we should be honest as to what we are actually doing, rather than trying to do it with another avatar and just pretending to, oh, I'm going to sneak in and then just do all your research without actually being
Yeah.
honest about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I did, and that's what I say in the paper as well. You need to try to, and people said that they checked out my credibility by looking at my profile, trying to match my profile with my university web page, seeing if I had some of them didn't do this, but some of them, because I specifically asked them, and same with the healthcare practitioners, to say some of them just took it on fact that was true. Other ones did actually check, is this person credible?
The other thing is I'm having to also, reveal the name of my primary social avatar to some of these people that I've met in the past, because I came into SL through the Open University. It was the case that I was doing a course back in 2009, and they said sign up and create an account and go and have a look. So, I have met people in education environments over the years but as my different avatar. So I'm having to now, I am people and say, this is who I am, you have met me before, kind of thing, which is difficult. But since I wanted to separate the personalities, or rather the accounts, but to give authenticity onto who I was, I'm having to do that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just paste in the conclusion of my paper, but if anybody absolutely wants the full text, I think it's in the Journal of Advanced Nursing. It's unfortunately behind a firewall. So if you don't have that and you want the full text, I'll send a full text to Makia and she can hand it out. But that was the kind of conclusion. So there's lots of what we've just discussed in that. And there'll be some good references at the end, so you can grab onto them as well. So I think there's a lot of differences. Some are similar to what you would do in the physical world, but are adapted to this world. Others are completely different. So there's a number of things in that paper that I think maybe are important. One of the things that I couldn't get into the paper, because as you know, in most papers there's a word limit, was about transcribing voice interviews. I just feel, and this is something I feel about, people sometimes send the transcription, the audio out to be transcribed. I think it is so difficult to transcribe something from this environment if you have no idea about it. I think it would be longer to go back through the transcript and trying to correct teleports, resing, alts, blah, blah, blah. Plus, I think it helps you to immerse in the data, obviously. All right, great. Oh, well, there you go. Great, Heidi, thank you. The full text, yeah? Great. So, there'll be some things that you'll have read, like in Tom's book, that are similar to what I say in my book. Sheila Minoccia has wrote about this as well, about researching in virtual worlds, and several other people that you'll see in the paper. So, and there's probably a few others that I just couldn't squeeze in, and a few that I've found since I wrote the paper, but that's the way of the world, isn't it? So there's more and more, if you like, researchers saying, these are things that we need to be careful about when we think about researching in virtual worlds. There is a difference.
Because I really need to get to know the environment, because there are I've read some papers and books and things where researchers have gone in to SL and written stuff, and you think, you haven't got a clue, mate. What are you talking about? So it was just, it's frustrating. And
it is.
I mean, recently we got a book we were told to go for the research methods module. I'm trying to remember quickly what it was called, but its latest incarnation had a section on virtual worlds. Research methods in education by the seventh, basically the seventh edition. It's just not the newest one. It has a section in virtual worlds, and it is very clear from as an SL user that the person that wrote it has never been into a virtual world at all, ever.
Yeah. And the problem
makes it a joke.
Yeah, and that makes it confusing as you to try and learn the research methods, but it also makes it harder for people. If people go in and bumble about and try to do it, then people will become less, it makes it harder for the rest of us. Yeah, it makes it harder for the rest of us because there then becomes a kind of suspiciousness about people that are researching. So we have to be very careful that there is a respect for the people that we're researching, whether it's in the physical world or whether it's in the virtual world. So that's a very good point as well, Tim.
Carly, Aveline had a question before that we left quite far up in the chat. Did the avatars you interview use a range of avatars themselves when they research healthcare information?
Sorry, I missed the end of that. Can you post it in? Is that possible? To repaste it into the chat so I can just read it? Is that okay?
Sure.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, thanks, Avalan. Did they have it? Sorry,
because you were talking about them doing research in their own healthcare and how it affects them. When they did their research, did they then change what avatars they were using?
Most of them said that they kind of kept the avatar the same way that it had always been. So that then, actually, it's a really good question, because what I then noticed was that very few of them said they changed their name, which is obviously fairly static in here. Can't really be changed. Most of them said they kept the look and that people would recognise them where they went. So in a way, I was kind of thinking, well, when you start to look at this, and others have kind of touched on this, I kind of argued that there ended up being a quasi-anonymity, because actually what was happening is there was a persistence of name, a persistence of behaviour, etc. So the other people that knew them within the virtual world associated certain behaviours, they had certain experiences with them. So therefore, you can argue against this, as I say. Was their anonymity actually reduced? But did that make them go and look for the information in an alt? None of them said that they did that. They said they went as they were. So
I can't imagine as an SL user, if I was looking for that kind of information, I can't see why they would bother, because to actually try and hide their identity, because if they're genuinely, if they live in SL, they see their avatar as themselves.
It's not necessarily hiding, but it may be a case that if you're trying to find particular bits of information from particular different worlds, in order to fit in with that world, you may then change your avatar. Or do you stay as the avatar you are, because that's who you presumably see yourself as, in trying to get the health care information that you want?
Yeah, I mean, there was elements that came through of embodiment of their avatar, whether it was the avatar look. Sometimes what they did with their avatar was actually change it to show the people that they knew that something was different, if you like. So, for example, someone that you knew very well in the virtual world would turn up with their hair up like as if it had an electric shock. So everybody noticed that, and they said, "Oh yeah, I did that because it just represents that I've had a chaotic day." So they did use their avatar to represent that. None of them, but they didn't deviate completely from the avatar. They played around with it sometimes,
So can
but
I
they
follow that
never.
up then?
Yes, of
So
course, go on.
I'm just going to say then, because we're talking about the idea that they've researched the information of health, and that then
Sure.
had an effect on their real physical
Yeah.
own health. Did they then change their avatar because they felt they were changing themselves physically, in the real world?
All right, okay. So, like, for example, did they make their avatar more muscly because they felt they were getting fitter, or did they change the shape of their avatar, or whatever else?
Different clothing.
I can't say that they absolutely said that. No, from the data that I have, I can't say that they said they totally changed their avatar. No, I don't have any data to support. Absolutely.
Just I'd be interested in how someone would, because they're changing.
However,
a bit of chicken and egg as well.
However, there is one
which
blog
would come first?
specifically about a guy who, now you might think he went too far, who was a little bit overweight, and his girlfriend has said he's went the other way, that he is, by looking at his avatar as a muscly type guy, that he started to go to the gym and he has made his avatar almost identical. His physical body almost identical to what his avatar looks like, and it had the two pictures next to each other. So for him, it definitely worked.
It would be hard, though, to decide which came first. I mean,
sorry,
because
who's speaking?
it's Heidi. Sorry, I've got a terrible sore throat. It would be very difficult to know which was the cause and effect. Was it that you decided to try and look more like your avatar, or did you try to make your avatar look more like you? So it would be hard to know which was imitating or changing to reflect the other.
Sure.
It would be really difficult to identify that cause and effect entirely.
Unless you did a specific study like that. You're right. Where what they were saying, it was more about the information that made them make a behaviour change than specifically their avatar, and that might have been the questions that I asked.
Kali, when you're interviewing avatars here in Second Life, you're losing some of the visual cues that they would give you, body language and things like that, when you interview in the real world. How do you make up for that?
Yep, absolutely. You do lose a little bit of that. Sometimes it was a bit different though, because they would maybe stand up and walk and sit back down. Sometimes they animated their avatar to show what they were saying. Do you know what I mean? So you can't deny that you will lose some of that. So you have to weigh that up and say, you do lose some of that. What you lose in that, though, can be made up in the fact that you've got an absolute transcript that is word for word verbatim. Or, if you were doing it over a telephone, you would have that as well. So yeah, I mean, I think every method you use has got its strengths and weaknesses, and you just have to kind of go with that. So there is a limitation to the way they can animate their face. So I had to just accept that in a way. Yeah.
Has anybody else got any more questions? Leighton, or anybody else got any more questions?
I was thinking that actually, I know we lose the body signals and the facial signals, but we don't lose, perhaps, if we're using voice. I think there's an element, voice becomes so important that we become attuned to every change in voice. And as you say, you have the absolute transcript. And quite often people are led into revealing more, I think, in virtual worlds than they would normally.
Yeah, I mean, that's a feature that some folk did say. That's a feature, I suppose, of anonymity in any kind of environment as well, some folk would argue. But yeah, what I would say is I didn't really get a feeling that any of them were lying to me. I never really felt that. I felt that people were genuinely telling their reality of events. Leighton, no problem at all. Thanks very much. Good to see you again. I'm sure we've met before on a few occasions. Somewhere.
Thanks, Leighton. Bye. Anybody else got any question for Kali?
Okay.
No? Thank you very much, Kali. I'm gonna take some of the students now traveling. What health? I know Imperial College in London has a good scene, but what other health scenes? And you've mentioned Houston, which I've taken some of you, haven't I, to see that plaque attack. What health scenes do you recommend that we visit? What's your favorite one?
Let me see if I can find the sorrels actually here quickly. I should have them somewhere. Now I need to remember if they're the right ones, of course. Obviously, I'm sure you've probably been to Virtual Ability. Let me see if I can find the other one.
Yeah, we've been there.
Yeah. So I'll throw some in that I can remember at the moment. So sorry, I am searching for them at the moment. Because I've kind of moved on, so I've probably got them somewhere. Remember, some of the places though are not about places, they're about groups, you know, and about talks. So some of them are not. Yes, that is, you're right, that is the HPP or whatever. I'm trying to find the one that is the nutrition.
The nutrition one, is that the one that has a game?
Yes, the game one.
Yes.
You've been there?
Yes, it's a university in the States, isn't it? Let me find out that one as well, I think.
You put on something and then you go, yeah. What I'll do is I'll have a wee, I'll maybe have a wee look through, and I'll maybe send you them in an email, and then you can.
Yeah,
give them
that's great. Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Kali.
Exactly. Good point, Tim. Sorry.
You basically work mostly in Second Life, don't you?
For my.
Do you use other virtual worlds?
I did at the start. When I've been in for about 5-6 years. Initially, I did, but I was using Second Life to teach my students. So I eventually just kind of stuck to Second Life because I thought I don't really have time to go between 3 and 4 different worlds, in all honesty. However, some of my participants, specifically in the second study, talked about being in the metaverse. So some of the things that they found helpful was about being in different worlds, not in just the one. So although I didn't do the interview anywhere else, people have spoke about other worlds and how they've influenced. But most of it was about Second Life. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Yes, sure. That was great. Thank you. Very interesting, Kali. We really enjoyed the presentation and the discussion as well. Lots of good tips for us if we decide to take qualitative methods when we move on to the dissertation or the PhD, as some of the students here are thinking of